views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello and welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I am Daren Jaime. We thank you for joining us. If you're watching and asking the question, what are the Social Justice Forums about? Well, we're a show that takes a look at the inequities that many people face. We promote civic engagement, and then we also give you multiple points of view. We have some very informative guests and some great topics. Stay with us. The Social Justice Forums begins right now. Welcome back to the show. Robin Hood is the New York City's largest poverty-fighting philanthropic organization. Now, recently, they've had some applications that have opened up for its grant readiness and insights training, with this year's cohort focusing on organizations serving children as well as youth. Joining me now, we have the managing director of Robin Hood Foundation, Suzi Epstein. And Suzi, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thanks. So for Robin Hood, obviously an opportunity for many people to actually branch out and to be able to better serve the community. So as you have this grant readiness training that's going on, talk to us about the cohort and what's happening right now.
I'll start by going backwards and saying that we launched the GRIT program, Grant Readiness Insights and Training, 7 years ago to provide nonprofit leaders of early middle stage organizations with the tools that they need to realize greater financial flexibility and secure more corporate and philanthropic support to drive them to greater independence. What we have seen, since Robin Hood's inception 35 years ago, is that there are many small and middle-sized not-for-profits that have very committed staff and a very intriguing and solid program model, but they haven't been especially successful in getting foundation money. And when an organization is overly reliant on just one source of money, whether that's government contracts or just board members and their friends, they're often not as able to be nimble or innovative or visible even. So being too reliant on only one funding source is something that can be extremely limiting for an organization. And we're trying to help groups diversify their funding streams so that they, number one, can have a little bit for a rainy day, and number two, really try to pilot new programs and services with more alacrity and more imagination.
Yeah. Walk me through a little bit for an organization, because we know that the big chains or bigger organizations that have bigger staff, they have the ability to have grant writers and things of that nature. But if you don't have the luxury of having that kind of capacity, it sometimes can be a very uphill battle, correct?
It can be, although knowing the tricks of the trade will get you a very long way. So sometimes it's not about the numbers of people on the staff, but really the mastery of certain tools and the ability to make a compelling and persuasive argument and to be able to talk convincingly about your program's results, your program's costs, your program's excellent governance, your staff commitment and satisfaction, and consumers and constituents talking about the way they've been treated and the strides that they've made. And this is not so much about having a rich and robust staff as really knowing what you have to present to evidence-based funders who are looking for that particular angle when they make decisions about investments.
So give us a little bit about what the training will actually feature. You gave me a little bit of an overview, but for the people who actually participate, what will they actually be able to achieve?
We did a survey of groups who participated in GRIT over the first 6 years of the program, and of the 72 groups who participated, about 2/3 of them raised additional money on an average of $400,000 within 2 years. Many of them also added members to their board of directors, or made tweaks in their financial presentations. Maybe they changed auditors or brought in a new chief fiscal officer. Many of them made improvements to their evaluation so that they could talk much more concretely and convincingly about outcomes as well as process and implementation. I will say this, the GRIT program is a series of a dozen workshops. It's 30 hours of content, which this year we are running in a hybrid model, both remotely and in person. We're hoping to have 2 or 3 in-person meetings. We offer a range of topics, each of which gets a fairly robust amount of time. And we also offer one-on-one sessions with the professionals who lead our workshops, so that groups that want some individual attention and, to roll up their sleeves and talk to one of the consultants independently have an opportunity to do that at the conclusion of the workshops for several weeks afterwards.
Yeah. Can you give me a little insight into the grant process right now? Down through the years, we know that, the state has budget cuts and the city's dealing with budget cuts, and opportunities for funding for organizations have really drastically been cut. I would imagine that means there's more people coming into the pool. Talk to us about what you're seeing in this whole grant atmosphere as of right now. Have things gotten better in terms of opportunities, or are things, a little tight right now?
That's a great question, and I'm going to say both.
Okay.
I do think that with public cuts in terms of resources, the competition for corporate and philanthropic money is more intense, and it is one reason that not-for-profits throughout New York City and across the country, quite frankly, need to be effective fundraisers. That said, I also think there is huge awareness and drive on the part of many foundations, including Robin Hood, to better penetrate small and hidden communities, to look at new and emerging leaders, to fund newer groups that are not centuries old, that are piloting innovative models. And so there's an explosion of opportunity, I think, for smaller organizations to secure private funding. And that's one reason actually that we developed the GRIT initiative.
Yeah. So give me a little bit of insight to who's eligible. How are applicants actually eligible for this?
We are looking at a sweet spot of groups whose budgets are between $500,000 and $10 million. We're looking at organizations that are not early stage. We're not looking at organizations who've existed for 1 or 2 years that may just have, a founder and a staff person, because we actually do want to train a team through GRIT. So we're looking at groups who have at least 3 years of operations, but are not more than about 25 years old. This year, we are targeting organizations who serve children, youth, and families. We have found in running GRIT that it's often more beneficial, both in terms of not-for-profit bonding and everyone rowing in the same direction, to serve similar constituents and have a similar mission. We did not adhere to that particular approach in our early years. We got a lot of feedback that it felt like a one-room schoolhouse. So we're trying to have groups have a certain mission in common. But I think it casts a fairly wide net to say children and families. We are looking for groups where the preponderance of their revenues is from the public sector, because if you're already getting a lot of foundation money, these workshops will probably not be optimally useful to you, because you've already nailed, part of the raison d'etre of this series. And we're looking for groups that have some experience with evaluation, because we do spend some time talking about extrapolating results. So a group has to have some way of collecting and tracking information about their constituents. They don't need to have a very sophisticated system, but they need to have some sense of what kind of strides and progress their clients have made.
Yeah. About how many are you looking to see in this cohort?
Our cohorts have been between 10 and 15 people. We usually have 50 people in the room because we have each group bring several members of their leadership team as well as a board member. So we have, so 3 or 4 people can attend each workshop. And I expect that we'll have about a dozen to 15 groups.
Yeah. Are you seeing a more increased, desire on the part of organizations, given the fact that we are in this I don't want to say we want to say post-COVID,
Yes.
COVID environment. Yeah, I don't know how to technically define it. I mean, we're getting, it seems as though the worst is over. We'll say it like that, but still it's a COVID environment. But, moving out of that, talk to us about that.
I would imagine that we will have several dozen applicants. In the past, we've had anywhere between probably 50 and 100 candidates submit applications. We're not trying to make this as hard to get into as Harvard, at all. We're hoping to pick a dozen groups that we think will benefit optimally from this. We expect that we'll have to make some very hard decisions, but again, we're trying to identify groups that are needy, not groups that are rock stars that are already raising a lot of money, and want to get an incremental benefit. So we tend to look at groups that are, have a good idea and a committed staff, but maybe slightly weaker in terms of securing foundation support.
So somebody's watching right now and says, listen, this sounds like something I really want to pursue after or look into. What advice do you give them?
I would tell them to look at our website, which has a little more information about GRIT and where the application rests. And to complete it, we launched the application long before the deadline. That's in 6 weeks from now. And we intend to actually talk to each applicant, and have a phone call or a Zoom convening with them and make decisions in September and then launch the program in October. It will run for 6 weeks. We will meet twice a week in the mornings, and we'll conclude by Thanksgiving. We'll conclude the class part by Thanksgiving. And then, as I mentioned, there'll be an opportunity to have one-on-one sessions with workshop leaders through the rest of the year and possibly into the winter quarter if people can't schedule, immediately, because we want to be very generous and flexible in terms of that element of the program.
Yeah. And for you, I know having an opportunity to work with organizations and see them go through this cohort. You spoke a little bit earlier about how you have been able to see organizations increase funding. Is there any particular organization that comes to mind that maybe you want to highlight and say was a great success story for you?
All of these groups are my favorites, and I really hate to call one out in particular.
You won't get in trouble. You won't get in trouble.
I'm going to say that Emma's Torch, which participated in the program about 3 years ago, is an organization that probably moved light years from where they were when they first came to Robin Hood. They were just past their startup phase. They are a job training program in the food industry. They struggled to articulate their model, and they were not really clear about their costs, because all of their expenses, everything from teaching to food to internship stipends, were all mushed together, and they were not able to crystallize each element of the program. And they weren't really tracking where all of their alums went. They knew that a lot of people were getting jobs. And in fact, they were helping with job placement, but they weren't quantifying the proportion of successes to each class. So if you're training 50 people, and 45 of them get jobs, that's an A. That's a 90% success rate. They weren't really presenting things like that. They were more saying, oh, 3 people went to classy restaurants and 10 of them went to family restaurants. And so it's a group that made enormous strides in talking about costs and evaluation. And they survived the pandemic beautifully. They started a revenue generating project in Brooklyn. They sold food at the public library at Grand Army Plaza for 2 years. They really nailed it, and I like for Grit to take some credit for that.
Well, we want to thank you for coming and sharing about what's going on with Robinhood. Great work and great opportunities for organizations to really level up and be able to take it to the next level. Suzi, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a joy to talk about this. It's incredibly gratifying, and I appreciate the invite to speak to you.
Great. Best wishes to you and best wishes to Robinhood. Listen, got to take a quick break here on this show. Why don't you stay with us because we got another special guest coming up right after this. The GMHC is working to end the AIDS epidemic and uplift the lives of all those who've been affected. They serve over 10,000 people each year living with and affected with HIV and AIDS in the 5 boroughs of New York City. And recently, we spoke with the Director of Community Relations at GMHC, Krishna Stone, to discuss intersectionality between HIV and AIDS pandemic, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll take a look at that right now. Krishna, glad to have you. And for your organization, I know that it's got to be a little challenging, particularly with the COVID-19. Those who are definitely affected a lot in the HIV and AIDS community who've definitely needed services and have been heavily impacted as well.
Yes, GMHC during the COVID-19 pandemic had to pivot providing services remotely. So most of the services continue to be provided remotely. However, we are now open Monday through Friday for people to access services by appointment only. What happened for us is that it was not an option for us to close. So we knew we needed to continue providing care services to people living with and affected by HIV and AIDS, our HIV prevention and testing programs, and our public policy advocacy at all levels of government. So some of our services that we have here include mental health and substance use counseling, grocery bag distribution, because prior to COVID-19, we did have congregate meals where our clients would come to the building to have lunch, and Monday through Thursday, we served 300 to 400 lunches, and then on Friday, we would serve 300 to 400 dinners. So what happened was in 2020, we shifted to packing and distributing bags of groceries to our clients in most need. And each Wednesday, for example, we distribute bags of groceries, which include shelf-stable food, ready-to-eat food, fresh produce, and dairy products. And while we surely miss our clients in terms of being able to interact with them in the building, it is lovely to see our clients when they do come to the building now each week. So we also have legal services. We have connections to housing. We have 2 housing programs. Gosh, we do so much.
Yeah.
And through our fundraising efforts, which consist of fundraisers. So we have our largest fundraiser coming up on AIDS Walk New York. It's back and it's live on Sunday, May 15th. And we also reach out to with proposals for grants, government grants, foundation grants, and we have individual supporters. So to say that we provide an array of services, that's just the beginning. So when a person comes to the agency to become a client, we go through a fairly intensive intake process. That's another word for an interview, so that we can best understand what's going on in the lives of our clients. And many times people come, when they also become a client, we recognize the health disparities that they may be facing, which include experiences with homophobia, transphobia, racism, stigma, discrimination, poverty, lack of quality health care, jobs and housing, and violence, police brutality, and more. And these health disparities create barriers for people living with and affected by HIV and AIDS to access care and HIV testing and prevention. So through our work, individually and as an organization, we work to address these health disparities so that people can continue to be healthy, and that their well-being is healthy, and that they're able to move from survival to thriving, and to feel like they can move forward in ways to access housing access jobs. And we know that stable housing, stable work, enough food in your home really helps people to stay healthy, and they also continue to be consistent in taking their medications, which reduces their viral load to undetectable. And that's also, not only is that good for the individual, it's good for the community, so that people are living with an undetectable virus to their sexual partners as well. So it works on a prevention model too.
Let me jump in and ask this question about when your organization first got started, and you dealt a lot, particularly at the height of the HIV and AIDS epidemic. You had a lot going on in terms of questions about homophobia and that HIV and AIDS being related as a gay disease, and we knew that that wasn't true, but yet and still that homophobia, though, that the stereotypes, they were out there, they still exist. Looking at where we are today, talk to us about how is it in terms of homophobia? Have we gotten a whole lot better? And what about messaging? Because I think that part of those disparities, you can break those disparities down with proper messaging.
Yes, so how we break down the impact of health disparities, there's multiple ways. It's a multi-layered activity. So we do create messaging through social media networks, through interviews such as this one. So interacting with the media outlets is very, very helpful so that people are hearing and receiving accurate information. We also address health disparities by being a part of coalitions and with other leadership in HIV and AIDS service organizations, community-based organizations, our elected officials, faith communities. We work with a variety of organizations to band together so that we're all collectively moving forward in addressing health disparities and providing accurate and supportive messaging. Stigma is still a huge problem and has been for 41 years during the HIV and AIDS epidemic. This year, GMHC commemorates 40 years as well. So, and it also, to address health disparities, we have to be creative, because it's not a linear process. You just don't go into a community and go, stop it, it's just, that's not going to work. So we work within the communities. We have folks coming to the building when we can do that more, and a variety of ways to communicate really helps. And also having these relationships with different entities and partnerships are essential in our work because we cannot do this work alone. So it really involves a team effort, not only within GMHC, but externally.
Yeah, you got a 40-year anniversary coming up. And so talk to us about this 40-year anniversary. What does it mean for your organization being around on the front lines for so long?
This year, being the 40th year for the organization, allows us to reflect on where we've been, how we started, formerly as Gay Men's Health Crisis. We still say Gay Men's Health Crisis, but we also say GMHC. We also reflect on what we are doing now in terms of balancing our work within an epidemic and the pandemic, and also where do we need to go? Not just towards the end of the year, but the next 5 years, and what kind of strategic planning do we need to continue to do? So I think of it as also a time to, look at those milestone moments that have occurred throughout the years. And, for example, in 2019, we brought back the AIDS Dance-a-thon, which was one of my favorite fundraisers, 5 hours of dancing with, thousands of people. And that started in the early 90s. And in 2019, we were able to bring it back, and that was just tremendous. So we can look at and evaluate, can we do this event again? Or do we need to do this event and create another event as fundraisers? What about our programs? How effective are they? Do we need to expand or merge programs? So this is a really important time to evaluate, think, make decisions on where we're going today and also where we're going tomorrow.
When you look at tomorrow, what do you see in the future for your organization?
I think the future, just staying the course to help to end the HIV epidemic, and that means continuing our partnerships and expanding our partnerships, finding new partners, supporting the partnerships that we've had for years. It means continuing to fundraise because fundraising has ebbs and flows, of like in terms of funding that dries up and then opportunities for new funding. And how does our development department keep track of what's going on with funding sources? And also maintaining our relationships, particularly with our elected officials, city, state, and federal, and continuing to raise awareness with our elected officials about the needs of people living with and affected by HIV and AIDS, and also advocating for funding from government entities to stay and or expand as it relates to the needs of people living with HIV and AIDS. So, and also another reality is we don't have a cure. We don't have a vaccine. We don't have a pill that makes all of this go away. And so we need to continue to advocate to the world of researchers that they must, hold HIV in the forefront of their work as well. And also the researchers who are looking at increasing prevention methods. For example, a new prevention method that has occurred is an injectable PrEP, called Epstein, and PrEP is pre-exposure prophylaxis. And for those who are not aware of PrEP is started in, it came into the universe in 2011, and then the medication started in, then moved from 2011 to 2012. This is when a person who is HIV negative takes a pill that is an HIV medication once a day, and it is 99% effective in preventing HIV, if they're exposed to HIV, from setting up in their body. So, and now, so the PrEP has been really helpful in preventing new HIV infections. And now with Epstein, people can go and get an injection of an HIV medication, and that lasts for a few months. And that might be easier for people to not have to take a pill each day. So the more advances we have with medication, both for people living with HIV or people who may be at risk at HIV, that is very beneficial as well. So it's all of these elements moving forward that have to stay in, stay with the progress that we have made and will continue to make. What I would like to see, and I've been at GMHC, this is my 29th year as an employee, I would like for us to continue to do more work with helping people to talk about all the kinds of sex that we have. People still find it very difficult to talk about sex. And that's understandable with the cultural and religious barriers and other community barriers. However, having these difficult but yet brave dialogues allows for people to check in with support about their sexual health and how that connects to their overall well-being. So the prevention work that we're doing, that has to continue moving forward. and the messaging around prevention, and also access to care for those who are living with HIV and AIDS.
Yeah. Well, Christian, we're going to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us, sharing about the GMHC, 40 years of great service to the community, and we know that we've got some great things to look forward to. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, and the work has to continue. And for those who are interested, gmhc.org is our website, and check it out. We have all kinds of really important information.
And we have to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more right after this. Welcome back. Urban Resource Institute is an organization committed to a world free of domestic violence, homelessness, poverty, and trauma, where communities are safe, stable, and thriving. The organization's programs impact more than 40,000 individuals annually through prevention, intervention, education, and direct services in both residential and non-residential settings. Joining me now is the Senior Vice President, Domestic Violence, Residential, and Legal Programs at Urban Resource Institute, Jennifer White-Reid. And Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Daren.
I gave a little bit of an intro as to your organization, but you can do a little better job. So tell us a little bit more about the work that you do.
Absolutely. I'm privileged to be part of the Urban Resource Institute. We have been around providing services in the community for a little over 40 years. And as you noted, we specialize in working with the community that impacted by victims of domestic violence and impacted by homelessness. You know, we really create programs that look at barriers to seeking safety, and really look at ways to help folks improve their lives. We are the largest provider of domestic violence shelter services in the country. We operate 14 domestic violence shelters, and on any given night, we can support 1,500 adults and children with their pets.
And when we talk about supporting children with pets, domestic violence is huge. And I know that having pets as a part of domestic violence is something that you work with. Can you give us a little bit of a correlation between the two?
Absolutely. I would say in about 2013, a little less than 10 years ago, we launched our People and Animals Living Safely program, PALS. At that time, we started to see the research that up to 50% of victims of domestic violence who were pet owners would not leave a dangerous situation because they could not take their pet with them. And at that time, very few domestic violence shelters allowed families to come in with their pets. So we created an innovative model that really thought about the entire family. This is a program that is trauma-informed, client-centered. We recognize that about 67% of American households have at least one pet. Pets are part of the family. They are our confidants. They are our supporters. They are our comforters during times of stress. And you can only imagine that when someone is experiencing domestic violence and they're thinking about leaving, that they don't want to leave anyone behind, and that includes their beloved pet. So we started our PALS program, and at this point, we now have 9 shelters out of our 14 sites that are pet friendly.
Amazing. And what difference have you noticed in having a pet friendly shelter?
Absolutely. We have recognized that it has opened the doors and reduced that barrier. So victims of domestic violence who may not have wanted to leave a dangerous situation because they did not think they could take their pet, they could now take their pet. We noticed that when families are together, they are healing and thriving and building a new life together with their pet. They are exercising together. They are really looking at their health together. We have a partnership with local vets and the ASPCA to make sure that not only the adults get medical care, but the pets get medical care. We also recognize that our clients appreciate that we see their pets as important. It really validates what's important to them. And so we like to build programs around individualized services, sort of what is meaningful to you. And we hope that, you know, other programs and other agencies across the city, state, and the nation will replicate our model.
So before this, right, you've implemented this program. Before this, how were you managing and what were you noticing as some of the barriers or challenges?
Yeah, and you know, sometimes it's an adult who has a pet and sometimes it's a child. So we heard stories from our childcare staff that our kids were mourning the loss of a pet. There's also statistics that show that abusive partners use pets to threaten and manipulate victims of domestic violence. So we've heard graphic stories of, you know, a perpetrator threatening to put a cat in a microwave and turn the microwave on if the victim didn't come home at a certain time. We have heard stories of pets not being fed, pets being placed in the closet, physically abused. And so these are serious, really serious situations that make victims of domestic violence think, I can't leave, I can't leave without my pet. And so certainly being able to open the doors to the entire family increases safety for everybody.
When we look at where we are right now, I mean, obviously this new center is here and it's obviously an advantage to a lot of people. Talk to us about what you're hearing now that you have this opportunity to have a pet-friendly place for victims of domestic violence. Are the residents excited, or how do they feel? Do they notice, I should say, even the shift?
So for your views, we are just delighted that we opened our new domestic violence shelter that is pet friendly in Queens. It is the very first pet friendly domestic violence shelter in Queens. And our clients have expressed such gratefulness to be able to come to this site with their pets. We have partnered with Banfield Foundation, which is so incredibly important because this partnership demonstrates that our clients' connections to their pets is important, that it's meaningful, that there's value there. It is a life-saving program. So Banfield Foundation has generously provided financial support to help us build a pet park in our backyard. It will create an engaging space for our kids and adults and pets to be able to exercise together. There will be a beautiful, colorful mural that is soothing and comforting. There will be agility equipment and supplies, and just really a wonderful recreation space for the families to be together.
And you did mention the Banfield Foundation really helping you for an outdoor park. And talk to us about what that really means to have them as a partner in making that happen.
Like I said, you can, when you connect with the private sector and they recognize the importance of this work, the importance of having a deep impact in the lives of domestic violence victims, it's incredible. And so this highlights the value of relationships, that human-animal bond. You certainly think about catastrophes that you've seen on television where there's Superstorm Sandy or Hurricane Katrina, where you see people holding on to their animals. And so this partnership is invaluable because we know that we'll be able to continue to do this work and help our clients really rebuild their lives and thrive and be healthy and address some of the trauma that they've experienced from being in abusive situations.
And having a residential program obviously is a great blessing to a lot of people who are really dealing with domestic violence. I know that we talked about pets and how it plays a role, but can you give us an idea a little bit? Because I think you talked about it just a little while ago, that sometimes when you have these victims who are experiencing domestic violence in such a tragic way, really getting them to safety requires the bringing along of a pet. And if a pet can't come, and I'll give you an example just for fire purposes. I remember, a fire, and some people would not want to be rescued or go through the full necessary things for a rescue because they didn't want to leave their pets behind.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And sometimes when it comes to domestic violence, I know that also can sometimes be the case.
We've had some survivors share that they have lived in their cars. They have gone couch to couch with their cat or their dog in unsafe situations because there were no shelters that allowed the pet to come in. So nationally, the statistics are about 3% to 5% of domestic violence shelters have some type of co-sheltering program where the pet is included. Sometimes it's a program where the pet is located in a kennel attached to the shelter, could be outside, could be in the basement. And other programs are similar to ours, which is the co-living model, where families get to live together with their pet, right? So that they can see each other every single day, they can nurture each other every single day. But Absolutely. Pets are part of the family. Sometimes they intervene and they protect victims of domestic violence during incidents. And Americans in particular tend to have pets. And, we saw an increase in pet ownership over the last couple of years due to the pandemic. So certainly we know that the domestic violence numbers are staggering. Every year the New York City Domestic Violence Hotline answers anywhere between 100,000 to 110,000 phone calls from victims of domestic violence. So you have a significant number of survivors and then significant number of pet owners. So that if there isn't a safe place for them to go as a family, adults, children, and pets, someone may stay in an unsafe situation.
So give me a little walkthrough here when we talk about domestic violence. We know that a lot of the numbers are staggering, the numbers continue to rise. What are you seeing in terms of since COVID? Because since COVID, a lot of people had to domesticate and be around people that sometimes they necessarily didn't want to be around. Work was an escape, school was an escape, all of that, but no longer when COVID hit. What were you seeing? Were you seeing an increase in numbers?
We absolutely saw a spike in domestic violence as a result of the pandemic, right? So people were not going to the office, so they were staying home and in close quarters. There were individuals who, may have in the past gotten on the phone to call a hotline. At this point, you couldn't because there weren't those private spaces to be able to seek help. We've heard stories of people who, waited all day for the perpetrator to leave, to go to the corner store, to sort of negotiate and figure out how she could leave the environment. We also had survivors who did not know what it was like to be in shelter. It is often a mystery to come into shelter. And there's a misconception that domestic violence shelters are, spaces with large rooms and cots. It's not like that. We definitely at Urban Resource Institute develop programs that are apartment buildings where our families have their own apartment. They have kitchen facilities, private bathroom facilities. We offer supplies recognizing that survivors will flee and leave most of their personal belongings behind. And so we always have a welcome kit for both the humans and the pets. And so we saw a significant spike in phone calls across the city, but we also had to engage in a couple of awareness campaigns because we wanted people to recognize that despite the pandemic, our doors were still open. Where a lot of folks were really scared and didn't know what to do, and maybe majority of staff were working from home. In our community, our work, we're all frontline workers. Our domestic violence shelters were always open. Our staff came to work every single day. We had day shifts and evening shifts and overnight shifts. So we went out of our way to make sure that, including conversations with media, about making sure that people knew that our doors are open, and they remain open.
And for you right now, obviously, the doors being open is a great thing because now you have people who have the opportunity to say, listen, if I'm in trouble, I can get out, I can get to you. And that's a great thing. But on the other side, there's so many others that don't make it out, right? What encouragement can you give to people about, because shelters come with a stigmatism sometimes. What encouragement would you give to people, or advice would you give to people when it comes to even thinking about this? Because sometimes the biggest stop is, I don't want to live in that shelter, but there's so much more to a shelter than I think people imagine.
Absolutely. And the most important thing is for everyone to understand that it's a personal decision for someone to make. We don't tell people that they have to leave. They have to really think about what's best for them. Sometimes getting an order of protection only makes the situation more difficult. So it's an individualized assessment. And so for those who are ready and able to leave an environment, we like to talk about building a safety plan. So whether you're building a plan to leave in 30 days or 60 days, think about your environment, think about, if you have access to a little bit of cash, where can you save those things? Where can you put your keys and your personal documentation, your social security card, copies of your birth certificates, if you have children, copies of your children's documentation, your passport? How can you plan if ultimately you know that this relationship is not a safe one and that you ultimately want to transition, but you're not sure how and when? What we'd love for you to think about, and you can talk to case managers, you can talk to hotline workers, is building that safety plan that you and you alone will execute when you are ready.
Yeah. Jennifer, before we leave, I want you to give an opportunity. I want to give you an opportunity to tell people how they can get in touch if they're really interested or they know somebody that needs this assistance.
So to your audience, if you are a victim of domestic violence or you know someone, you can reach out to Urban Resource Institute, URI, by reaching out to our website, which is urinyc.org. We have a host of information and materials that you can read through, including safety planning materials. You can also contact the New York City Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-621-HOPE. To be assessed for safety and to be placed in a shelter, including a domestic violence shelter that would accommodate the needs of your entire family, including a pet.
Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us, and certainly thank you for the work that you're doing to helping families and victims who really need this much needed assistance. Thank you so much.
And thank you again for including me in this really important conversation.
Definitely important conversation. Thanks much.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
All righty. We want to let our viewers know that we've come to the end of our show today. We hope you enjoyed this week's discussion on the Social Justice Forum. Now we want you to stay tuned because guess what? If you want to rewatch the Recablecast, you can do that on BronxNet. And then also you can follow us on the website at BronxNet.org. We invite you now to share your point of view if you wish to. You can always do that on our social media platforms at BronxNet TV. Join us next week where we aim to elevate the discussion, bring you some more hot topics, and most of all, some very informative guests. I'm Daren Jaime saying take care, God bless, and thank you for watching the Social Justice Forums.